Hello fellow YouTubers, welcome to another episode of Develop with WP. My name is Bobby Bryant and today we're going to finally get started on our how to build a plugin tutorial series. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting series. We've covered in previous videos, really recapping everything you're going to learn, but today we're actually going to get started. The series itself is going to be about building a jobs plugin, so a plugin allow you to list job listings on your website. But today we're kind of going to start off on a slight tangent and talk about just a few core things with some code that you really need to understand before we can even start any type of development. And today specifically we're going to talk about two things, and that is how to build a plugin as far as what are the minimum requirements needed to make something a plugin. And then we're going to talk about a core foundational principle that you really need to understand whether you're doing plugin development or theme development. And that foundational principle is understanding WordPress hooks and how to use them. All right, so enough talk. Let's get into today's lesson. The first thing I want to point you to is a resource that is out there, and it's called the Plugin Handbook. And it's at developer.wordpress.org. And it is actually a really handy resource that has a ton of great information about developing plugins in WordPress. One of the really cool things about it is that it was actually just recently updated as of the date of this video. So it is a very up-to-date and valuable resource. And you'll actually see right here, section 2 is the basic plugin requirements, and then section 4 are the hooks. So we're going to skip around a little bit, but I think section 2 and 4 are really where we need to start. And so today's lesson is going to really cover those areas of this plugin handbook. All right, so to get started, we need to create a plugin. Let me open up my terminal. So you'll see here that I'm in the WP contents folder for my site. This is my sandbox site. And if I cd into plugins and do a list, you'll see all the plugins that are currently activated for this site. So what we have to do to create a plugin at first is we really just need to do one thing, which is to drop a PHP file into this folder and then add some comments to the top of that file to let WordPress know that this is a plugin. We're going to go a little kind of a step forward, and we're going to create a folder to put it in because as this tutorial series goes along, our plugin is going to consist of multiple files, but at a very basic level it doesn't even need to be a directory, it just needs to be a file. But I'm going to create a directory first. Alright, so make directory basic plugin, then I'm going to cd into that one. Alright, and then I'm going to create my file. Alright, so now if I ls and do a list of my basic plugin folder, you'll see that there's a basic plugin.php. So I've got this PHP file in there, there's nothing in it. We're going to go ahead and open it. In my code editor, I'm using Sublime Text. And before we actually start coding, I'm going to go to my sandbox file and look at the plugins. If I refresh, you'll see that there are no, the plugin doesn't exist in here. So what we need to do, like I said, is create that comments section. So let's go back to Sublime Text and let's do our comments. First thing we're going to do for this file is we're going to open up PHP. Then we're going to add our comments. All right, the first thing we're going to put is plugin name. And we're just keeping this simple, basic plugin. Next thing we're going to put is plugin URI. And what plugin URI is it actually creates a clickable link for it's the visit or view details link that you can click on to take you to more information about your plugin, maybe even potentially download the plugin. And so it's just a clickable link. And then the last thing I'm going to put right now is author. I'm going to list myself for creating this awesome plugin. All right, so we're going to save this file, and then I'm going to refresh. And now you're going to see that basic plugin now shows up in here. And all it has is the plugin name, it has the author, and it has the visit URI, so the plugin URI that we added. That simple. So just these 3 lines of code, in essence, made us a very basic plugin. I'm going to paste in a little bit of other information just to save some time here. If you look at the plugin handbook, you'll notice that there are a number of different things you can add to this, different comments. It's really up to you. Again, the only thing I've added is an author URI, so now my name will become clickable. I'm going to change this version to 1.0 because we're ready to release this baby. And I also have a license. Another thing that you'll commonly include, which is in the plugin handbook, is you'll actually list out a paragraph or 2 description that states, what this license encompasses. I'm leaving it off for just the sake of this video, but it is worth noting. Now if I go back and I refresh, you'll see that it has a version and my name. I did leave off the description, so let me add a description. We want people to know what this thing's about. If they don't know what our plugin does, they're probably not going to download it. So the plugin we're going to create for this tutorial series is a job listing. So this is going to display job opportunities. I'm going to leave that as is, even though that's not what this plugin does, just so you can see that now the description is being populated on this plugin page. Now I can actually go and activate it if I want. You'll see that it says plugin activated. Sadly, it doesn't do anything, because this plugin doesn't do anything. So let's just leave it at that. Alright, so that's the first part of this video, which is just how to build a basic plugin. In essence, that is really all it takes to theoretically create a plugin. Obviously we're going to do more later, but that's the basics. That's lesson 1. So now we're going to transition into WordPress hooks. So this is a core foundational principle that every WordPress developer really needs to get an understanding of. I think oftentimes when we first get into WordPress development, and there's nothing wrong with this, but we tend to find code snippets and we're posting them into our functions or copying them into functions.php. They do some really cool stuff. We're not really sure what's going on or how it really works. Well, generally speaking, the way it works is with WordPress hooks. So let's discuss this. The first thing I want to talk about is how what WordPress is, the WordPress model development or program model. That's not a very good term. So you had the hype these days is this MVC, right? Model View Controller type of configuration. Well, WordPress really isn't. That isn't WordPress. WordPress is more of what's considered an event-driven program or platform. So what that means is that WordPress executes certain pieces of code at certain times depending on what the user or the viewer is doing on the site. So for example, when you're in the admin, WordPress is executing and displaying code based on the fact that you're in the admin, whereas on the front page it's executing and displaying different code. So it's event driven. With it being event driven, what that then allows us to do is use what are called hooks to essentially hook into WordPress and tell WordPress that we want it to execute some type of code at a certain point in time based on what it's doing. And the 2 types of hooks that WordPress has that we can use are called actions and filters. So let's talk about those. And then we're going to do some coding examples. The first one, actions probably are used a lot more often, I would think. But WordPress actions, essentially you're telling WordPress to execute some type of code that's a new type of code that doesn't exist in WordPress. So you're trying to get WordPress to do something new and different. With a filter, you're actually taking a piece of code that already exists in WordPress or a piece of data that already exists in WordPress, and you're going to take that data and you're going to filter it. You're going to do something to that data and then change it in some way before WordPress actually uses it. So a good way to think about it is that, you know, an action is doing something new and a filter is doing something to something, right? WordPress is with a filter, WordPress is already going to execute a piece of command. It's already going to do some type of action, and a filter is just your way of hijacking that in a sense and changing the output so that it does something slightly different, or does the same thing but in a slightly different way. All right, and parts. There's gonna be 2 more videos in this series. The next video we're actually going to do some really cool stuff with actions, and then the third video we're going to do some really cool stuff with filters. So if it's not totally clear yet, it will become more clear with the next 2 videos. Now, before we conclude on this video, one of the things I do want to look at is I want to show you I don't really think it's probably considered a programming pattern, but it's a pattern within the code that you're going to use on a regular basis when working with WordPress hooks. And what this code pattern looks like is this. You're going to create a function because you want to do something. You're going to name that function. That function is going to do something, and then you're going to use what's called an add action or an add filter to tell WordPress when you want this cool function you built to do it's something. So this is a pattern. There's a little bit more to this, so I want to show you this. Both an add action and an add filter, there's technically 4 parameters that they take. So let's look this up in the codex, right? So if we look up add action, we'll see that there's 4 parameters that we can pass into it. First is the hook, and then the next thing is the function to add, and then the other ones are priority and accepted args. So what happens is that you can actually set a priority. So in a certain instance that you want something to happen at a certain time, you can change the priority. Generally, though, when you're creating actions and filters, you only usually set the first 2 parameters. It's not usually needed to set priority and args. As you can see here, they default to a priority of a 10, and accepted args defaults to 1. But it is good to know that there are 2 more parameters that you can add into this function because there will be certain times when that will be useful. But as you can see here, the primary 2 things that you need, because as you can see there, it says that these 2 are required, and these are the 2 you normally only add, is you need to add the hook and you need to add the function to add. So what does that mean? The hook is where do you want WordPress to execute this command? And WordPress has a lot of hooks built into it. In the next video, I'm going to show you a page that lists all of them. There's hundreds of them. But essentially, you're wanting your function to get executed at a certain point in time, and that certain point in time will determine which hook. So the first thing you'll put is a hook, and then the next thing is the function to be added. What the function to be added is, it's your function. So this do something cool is your function to be added. So that's a pattern that you'll see within WordPress when you're developing, is this add action, add filter pattern where you create a function that does something and then use an action or filter to execute that command at a certain point in time. And it looks just like this every time. A filter will be the same way. If we were to look it up in the codex, it has the same 4 parameters it can take, and it'll also have the hook that you want to use and the code that you want to execute, just like the function. Alright, so that's the core principle, one of the core foundational principles you need to understand before you do any WordPress development. In the next 2 videos, like I said before, we are going to now take this basic principle and put it into action. And what I want to do is show you some really cool hooks with actions and filters doing really somewhat neat stuff to WordPress. So thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video. If you like this video, please subscribe to it, share it, let your friends know. If you have any questions, please post those in the comments. I try to do everything I can to answer everyone's comments. Again, this YouTube channel isn't about me. It's about helping the WordPress community and making the WordPress community better and more knowledgeable by me sharing what little bit I do know. So again, thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.